Campaign trail, thank you. I want to talk now about the debates and everything else with 2016 CNN political commentator Paul Begala and Republican strategist Sabrina Schaefer. Thanks to both of you for joining us. So, Sabrina, I want to start with you. Most basic question. What's wrong with asking tough questions in a presidential debate?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm actually sort of appalled that there's been so much concern over it from the GOP. I think the number one thing a candidate has to do is being willing to engage. And you have to be willing to engage with people who don't necessarily agree with you. Otherwise, how do you get votes? So I think the worst thing Republicans can do is to try to alienate any one network. I think they have to go back out there and they have to give some better responses.
Mm-hmm. Paul, I want to ask you, though, so let's... You know, one of the questions, I suppose, is there something that crosses the line? I mean, you look at, for instance, John Harwood's question. He asked Donald Trump if he was running a comic book version of a campaign. I mean, does that get into... I mean, this is an issue as a journalist you have all the time. What's the tough question? What gets a little too personal? I mean, did you hear anything there that struck you? You've been around for a while. It's going too far.
They need to toughen up. I mean, as you know, but as our viewers should know, I advise a pro-Hillary super PAC, right? So I've got a stake in Hillary winning. And yet, when CNN hosted the debate with the Democrats, this is Anderson Cooper's first question to Hillary. Quote, will you say anything to get elected? Did I whine? No. Did Hillary whine? No, because it was a tough question, but it was a fair one, right? He hit her hard. I mean, it was a long wind-up and a hard punch. She gave a good answer. Trump could have knocked that out of the park. He's a very talented guy. So here's what I want to do. I love what Reince Priebus is doing. I think it's great to pull out of NBC. And our super PAC will help sponsor it. And he'll be the moderators.
Good for you or good for Republicans?
Well, good for me. Right. Well, let's get Rush Limbaugh, Bill O'Reilly, and Sean Hannity. They can be the moderators because I want people to see Republicans unfiltered, uncensored. I want them because I want them to say, yes, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. We should turn over to Wall Street, and Medicare should be vouchers controlled by insurance companies, and women shouldn't have access to abortion if they're raped. I want unfettered conservatism to come out. So I think I'm on the same page as Mr. Priebus.
I'm sure you can see a line of argument, but you also heard the word whining. Is this whining in your view?
You know, in fact, I think it is a little bit of whining because I actually thought that there, you know, sort of in contrast to what they're saying over at the RNC, I thought that there were some softballs in there. There were a few. I mean, for instance, they started the debate asking about your greatest weakness, right?
You should have that prepared, like your favorite book and your most
what's on your iPad, you know. And also, I mean, I thought there were some real questions that they failed to actually engage properly on. Things like when they asked about the wage gap, all we heard about was sort of, I mean, there was sort of this convoluted answer. There wasn't really a direct answer to women. Republicans still have a long way to go with some of these things, and I was sort of shocked to see that, hey, they're whining about it rather than taking it on head first.
You know the answer to the question? You just say, my only weakness is I work too hard. I care too much about the American people.
Right.
So I do want to ask you about this other thing that someone was talking about, this leaked Bush campaign document with this opposition research on Marco Rubio, intentionally leaked, obviously. But do you think there's anything wrong about, on that particular question, asking Rubio about his campaign finances? Because that was another one of those questions that fell supposedly under that category as going too far.
No, I don't think it's going too far necessarily. I think actually that this could be a benefit for Rubio, right? I think most Americans have some trouble with their finances. I think most Americans find our tax system convoluted and difficult. I think most Americans are going to, in some way, identify with the fact that he had, you know, school loans and that, you know, getting ahead is difficult. And so I think that actually he could use this to his advantage.
And I imagine they understand buying a fishing boat, right? That was one of the things he got criticism for. But Paul, you know, as a Democrat, let's say you're advising for you'd love an intra-party war, as I'm sure you're relishing here. But if you were advising Bush, I mean, would you be telling him to unfurl this opposition research going after his native son, his Florida native son? Does it make him look, does it increase that death spiral kind of talk about his campaign?
It might, and I don't think, I'm probably wrong, it's not my party. I don't think his path is made clearer by attacking Marco. In fact, I think you're right, it makes him look weak. And I thought Marco got the better of the exchange in the debate. If I were Jeb, I would attack one of the outsiders. If you want to win the establishment primary, be the best establishment candidate by attacking the insurgents. The insurgents should be attacking. In other words, that's the crossfire. Literally, I don't mean this as like some.
He used to be the outsider, right? Now
but
he's
he
the
is very much now. I think
Rubio
is very much now the establishment guy, and
at least
that's
in comparison to a Trump or a Carter.
I wouldn't, you know, I would because Marco's answer was so human. Which is like, hey, you were my best friend a few months ago. Now
who doesn't have trouble balancing their checkbook?
Well, I think he's hugely vulnerable on not his personal finances so much, but just a lot of. There's going to be a lot of time to analyze it.
I want to ask both of you. We don't have much time, but you do have this decision now for the U.S. to go put ground troops in Syria. As you know, Sabrina, a lot of Republican candidates have been hitting the Democrats, and particularly President Obama, for not being tough enough, not standing up to Russia, to China, not having a credible strategy in Syria. Does that does this now take away anything from that line of attack?
Well, I think it's interesting because I feel like this is an administration that originally thought that they could sort of disentangle us from the Middle East by simply closing Guantanamo, and now it's clear that, guess what, that's not the case. We have to be much more aggressive. I don't think that people are going to necessarily feel confident enough just with this because there's not really a whole strategy or a sense that we really know where we're going next. But I am sort of comforted in some level to think that we might be a little bit more aggressive in pushing back on ISIS.
Paul, just very, very briefly, Hillary Clinton has been pushing for more intervention. Does this, in a way, validate that point of view as she's running?
It may, but it should not be. It should be discussed in the campaign. It should. But I don't believe for a minute the president's doing this for political reasons. Okay, he may be right, he may be wrong, but he's trying to defend American interests over
and the situation deteriorating on the ground fast.
Right.
Paul Begala, Sabrina Schaefer, thanks so much for joining us. In our national lead, a plane erupts in flames seconds before takeoff. Now, troubling new questions about what really happened in the moments leading up to that fire. Plus, remember this scene from The Exorcist? On this day before Halloween, Jake Tapper takes the director of that horror film back to the infamous location. That's right after this.